I'm from the Veterinary Poison Information Service in London. We are consulted over poisonings of all sorts, which will include foods, and I'll talk about those. We answer lots of inquiries, 11,000 inquiries a year about. So we answer calls from vets. We do answer calls from the public, although that's just a new service. So it's mostly from veterinary surgeons about anything. Most of it is companion animals. So our bias is very much cats and dogs, although we do answer inquiries from about any animal that you come across. And I'll talk about some of that. I'll touch on those a little bit. So what we get questions about. This is a sort of just a list of things we get called about, and you can see none of that is food, except it is quite high. The fifth thing is grapes and the grape products. So it is there. Most of the things, and I guess you could include bone meal in that if you wanted to. And there is also chewing gum, which isn't a food, but it has a food-related issue, which is to do with xylitol, which again I'll touch on in a bit. So, I guess this is labouring a point, but Paracelsus, this man here, said this a long time ago, and everyone's heard this, a version of this, and that's true for food is for anything else. Everything's poisonous eventually if you take enough of it, and that's an important sort of consideration. So I'm just going to talk about a few things, obvious things. So Theobromine from chocolate is a significant issue for us. Theobroma cacao is food of the gods, and certainly humans are very fond of chocolate, and so are dogs. This is really a dog issue for us. We do get poisonings from other animals, but it's almost always dogs. But it's not always chocolate bars. And in fact, last week we had a case of a dog who died after eating 500 grams of drinking chocolate. You have to try quite hard to poison yourself with drinking chocolate, but you can do it if you're a dog. So we get lots of inquiries. This is a seasonal graph. This is last year's, but the graph is the same each year, really. And so we're in chocolate season now. So it will have a big spike of chocolate calls because there's a lot of chocolate around. There's always chocolate around, but there's more chocolate around now. And people buy chocolate ahead of time because they think they're going to run out, I guess. But, and dogs don't really understand they should wait till Christmas, so they will eat it if they find it. So the toxic effects of theobromine, well understood. Theobromine is the methylxanthine, so not dissimilar from caffeine and theophylline. So you can look at the data in the literature, and 20 milligrams per kilogram will cause toxic effects. That will be mild GI, CNS signs, and seizures at 60. And it's seizures that usually kill dogs from acute exposures. However, that's not a very useful thing. The chocolate bars and chocolate cakes don't have theobromine content on them on the packs. We use a more usable sort of rule of thumb. So 14 grams per kilogram of milk chocolate. The dog that took so that's most of them are dark milk or white chocolates. Just as an aside, white chocolate isn't chocolate really. Contains cocoa butter, but not cocoa solids. Therefore, there's very little theobromine in it. So white chocolate is not toxic, really. It's got a lot of fat in it, and that's obviously an issue potentially, but not a theobromine problem. And so just to expand that list, to just include I put this in because of the drinking chocolate. So we would say 40 grams per kilogram would be a toxic dose or a potentially dangerous dose. So that dog who ate drinking chocolate was really trying hard, but didn't present until 17 hours. So that was the additional problem for that dog. It was a very late presenting or quite late presenting case. So there's a range there, including things which aren't foods really, cocoa shell mulch, things you buy to put on the garden to suppress weed growth. Dogs will eat that. Breakfast cereals, potentially problematic, but it's really dark chocolate that causes most of our issues. because relatively small amounts of dark chocolate can cause toxicity in dogs. Hershey's, Hershey's not on. There's not a list there because Hershey's got a complex product mix, but we have got a complete list of Hershey's concentrations if you want them. So what does it cause? It causes. I mean, you've probably all seen. Most of you have seen this, I guess. It causes CNS stimulation. Basically, this is a methylxanthine, so it's going to cause CNS stimulation, tachycardia, agitation, can cause convulsions, and the fatal cases are almost always related to uncontrolled, prolonged convulsions, which are difficult, and if they occur before they get to a veterinary surgeon. That's going to be difficult, and that's what causes problems. That's a very common food. It's the commonest that causes serious problems for us. So here's a case. This is a dog who was a 2-year-old dog, and this is a problem from our point of view. This is a dog who was vomiting for a few days and seemed depressed, and his urine has gone red, and so the owners brought the dog in, and laboratory investigation showed the dog was anemic. So, if you ask people this question, and you're not giving enough talk about food, one of the things people will say, well, that's probably a rodenticide, but it wasn't. So that's one of the sort of differentials. It wasn't a rodenticide. Dog hadn't had access to zinc preparations, but had been given a Chinese takeaway, or the remnants of a Chinese takeaway, and this dog did survive, but that was a dog who became anemic after eating onion. So Allium species are a significant issue for us. So Allium is a large group of species which includes onions and garlic, but we have reports mostly in dogs from us, but actually if you look in literature and our own cases, you find toxicity in dogs and cats and cattle and goats and sheep. Surprising, really, given that these wild garlic grows wild, so you'd think the ruminants would be exposed to it anyway, and they will eat it and will be okay, unless they are compelled to eat large quantities. So cases, for instance, in sheep who are in fields where there's lots of garlic and they haven't got adequate access to other material, they will eat it and they'll have toxicity. So we know what's unusually, we know what the problem is. Everyone knows if you cut onions, you get sulfur release. That's what it smells of, and that's what causes the discomfort in your eyes. And that is what's happening when dogs eat it. They get this impact on their glutathione. Reduces the effectiveness of glutathione, and you get a hemoglobin damage, and you get erythrocyte damage in the formation of Heinz bodies. So that's, and again, as with other things, if you present late, then things are usually worse, and that's one of the issues here. Is that with Sammy, the dog who was ill, the owners didn't present for a few days, and that's because it wasn't witnessed. It was a witness ingestion, but they didn't assume or didn't think it was toxic. And therefore there was a disconnect between the exposure and the onset. And if that's not witnessed, that's more difficult if you get that disconnect. So presenting late is not good. So the signs of toxicity will not necessarily occur for a day or up to 5 days, but the effects are usually quite non-specific. But the specific things, apart from the onion smelling breath, which is perhaps a bit of a giveaway, is the Heinz body formation. And unless you look for it, you won't see it. Heinz bodies. These are Heinz bodies. This is damaged hemoglobin leading to erythrocyte changes, which are then seen as being defective and removed from circulation, hence the delay in onset. So they're not removed immediately, they're removed over time. So the question that we're asked, and I guess the acute question is how much is toxic? That's a brown onion out of my kitchen, and so how much does that weigh? That's just an ordinary sort of, that sort of size. Any idea what that weighs? 100 grams. Yeah, very good. 110 grams that was. 110 grams of onion. So what's toxic dose? So if you look at the literature and our own cases which support that, then you're looking at perhaps 0.5% of body weight, 5 grams per kilogram. So that's, and there are some experimental studies which show that that's enough to cause Heinz body formation, significant Heinz body formation. And it's possible that garlic is more toxic. There's probably a very great range of toxicities between different varieties of onion, different varieties of garlic. So things which are sold as strong onions, which are very smelly, very tasty, they're probably more toxic. I've no evidence for that, but that's probably that's my feeling. But people don't know what they're putting in their food, and certainly don't know what they're getting from a Chinese takeaway. That's for sure. And I don't know if you do this thing, but people get takeaways and they eat all of the meat and other things, and they leave the onions, and that's what the dog gets. So there's the danger. A lot of times I want to overdo it. We don't get large numbers of cases of food-related onion toxicity. Most of it actually, a dog's eating the onions directly. They're either stealing them from kitchen work surfaces, or they're digging up things in the garden. That's what's more likely than in our experience. So in terms of that's a dangerous dose of potentially half a percent of your body weight. And that's quite a lot, isn't it, really? But it's not. But it is achievable. So Sammy was a 15 kilo dog. So you'd have to take, on that basis, you'd have to take 5 times 15. So that's not a very large amount of onion. It's an achievable amount. So that's. But this is the one that's on my list. The fourth or fifth down the list of things we get called about. And I think the reason we get called about it is that it's happening quite a lot, and people don't know what to do with it. They're aware, veterinary surgeons and maybe the public are now aware that it's toxic, but the question is how much is toxic? And that's the question for onions, for which we've got sort of an answer. So anything, not just grapes, but dried grapes, and that doesn't change if you cook it. So Christmas cake, another seasonal issue, mince pies, particularly dangerous, very high density of dried fruit. And there's said to be no particular correlation between constant ingestion and clinical effects. It would seem not to be true, because it does appear that dried fruits are more toxic, which would suggest there's a concentration of the toxin. The difficulty is we have no idea what the toxin is. We don't have a understanding of why grapes cause toxicity to dogs, and this is a dog issue. There are some cases in cats where maybe that's true, and maybe a rabbit or two has been unwell, but it seems it's really a dog issue, and that's probably a dose thing. I mean, dogs will be very happy to eat a 500-gram punnet of grapes without thinking about it. Humans will do the same thing and not come to any harm. So there's a definite species differential there. So risk factors, dogs already with renal impairment were at risk. This is a renal disease. So it causes GI signs, but most importantly, it causes hematuria. It can cause pancreatitis, and it causes acute renal failure. Again, the question we are asked, and the question that for a veterinary surgeon is most interesting, is what is toxic? My kitchen table again. Those are crimson flame grapes, which are sort of standard things you get in a supermarket. So quite small red grapes. There's about 15 in that little bunch. Any idea how much that weighs? That's 90 grams of grapes. So each grape is about 15 grams. And obviously that varies hugely, because you get very small grapes and you get big, huge things. So that's not wholly reliable, but it's about right. So, what's dangerous? Fatal cases. Looking at literature, our own cases, these are the figures you get. These are dogs taking tens of grams per kilogram of grape. So a dog who eats a 500-gram punnet of grapes is clearly at risk, how big they are. And small dogs who are given handfuls of grapes are probably at risk eventually if they take enough of it. But the difficulty is that could be useful. We could say 10 grams is okay, or 5 grams is okay per kilogram, but actually you can't say that. This is a published case. This is published in 2004. This is renal. This dog didn't die, but it probably would have done if it hadn't had 12 days of hospitalisation. And this dog only taken 4 or 5 grapes. We don't know how much. We don't know what grape variety it was, how big those grapes were, but that's probably 4-ish grams per kilogram. So if you ring us and say, I've got a dog who's eaten some grapes, we're going to say treat it. And that's 48 hours of twice maintenance fluids. So that's not nothing. So the big question, so you've got a dog who's eaten a punnet of grapes, that's easy. Slice crisp cake, that's easy. That's toxic, you should treat it. The more difficult question, you've got a 40 kilo Rottweiler who's eaten a biscuit which contains 3 or 4 raisins. Do you really treat that? 48 hours of IV fluids in a 50 kilo dog? Strictly speaking, yes, because we don't have a toxic mechanism. We don't understand what toxin is. We don't have a toxic dose. So, in truth, if you ask me that question, I might be a bit more liberal. But strictly speaking, we'd say yes, treat it. So the prognosis is good. If you get the dogs early, then they do fine. But if you get once they've started to show signs of renal impairment, they don't do so well. And we have a number of deaths each year from raisin grapes. I think it's mostly dried fruit. Actually, that's the problem. So that's grapes. What's this? This is my colleague's compost heap. So this is not food. Okay, was food, and I thought I'd mention the sort of natural thing that's going on. Just to echo some of the points earlier, but people are there's an increase in composting at home, and councils are encouraging people to collect compost bins, and dogs are very happy to eat it. Dogs don't have a disgust mechanism. They're very happy to eat disgusting things. A cat wouldn't touch that with a barge pole, but a dog would. So tremogenic mycotoxins. So the whole thing about you mentioned Amanita folides being natural and poisonous. Well, that's true, absolutely true. But so are mycotoxins from mold growth. So poorly maintained food is going to contain mycotoxins. And if it's this badly maintained, it's going to contain a lot of mycotoxins and will cause severe convulsive episodes in dogs. So the stuff you get, and that's another food issue. So these are the 2 of the commonest molds you find on foods. One of them you'll recognise, sort of, Penicillium roqueforti, roquefortine. It's the blue mold in Roquefort, and also in Stilton. Humans seem quite tolerant of it, but dogs are not. And dogs who eat, and certainly once it's started to become rotten rather than just veined, then it's quite poisonous. So that's a sort of example of a natural material which is not safe. And the question is how, if you see all it, so what does it do to dogs? It causes that's true. That's not just in cheese. It appears in lots of things. Bread is common, and by the time bread is starting to go off and produces little blue pustules on it, which people then cut off and toast and give to their children. By the time no one's done that in this room, have they? But by the time it's fruited, the mycelium of the fungi has completely invaded the bread. It has to have done that to get the fruiting body. So, and that's okay, a little bit of now and again. But chronically, who knows? Who knows what that has? These are very toxic agents. So the unexplained no etiology for liver and kidney disease is caused by what? I don't know that that's not causing liver and kidney disease down the track. And although that people, and just to go back to grapes, we know that people feed dogs the odd grape here and there, and that's fine. Dogs like them, and that's all right. And dogs don't seem to come to any harm, but you don't know that that's not knocking out a nephron each time. So the natural thing is not useful. It's not a useful guide to safety. So this is a food issue, and this is a pet food issue, sort of, which is Fanconi syndrome from Jerky Treats. So you're aware of this? That there's this certainly not in the UK in significant numbers yet, but in the US, in Canada and Australia, there's been an outbreak of Fanconi syndrome in dogs from apparently eating these things, Jerky Treats. which are commercially available foods, treats. They're not meant to be a significant element of diet, but they're meant to be treating dogs, and they're little bits of something, meat, possibly meat. It was meat, and that causes renal failure in some dogs. The cause is unknown. We don't know what's in it. No one knows what it is yet. We've set ourselves up as a registry point to try and get a feel, try and track the occurrence of this in UK. So currently it's very low level, so that's good, and maybe it's been caught fast enough. If you remember, if you cast your minds back to the pet food and melamine issue some 2 decades ago, and that was deliberate use of substitution of proteins with melamine, which obviously has caused significant problems in both animals and humans. So this is another example of that, of someone somewhere down the chain is doing something to that meat to make it toxic.